All right, welcome back. We are on section 5.5. This is percent and estimation. And we don't need that page. Let's go to this one. All right, so let's take a look at this and let's start off. Let's talk about the world here. All right, so the total area of the earth is 196,800,000 square miles. The graphic at the right shows the percent of the area of the earth that is land and the percent is water. So you can see, if we take a look, 29% of the earth is land. So we only get 29% to live on, 71%, the dolphins and the whales get all that. So 71% is water, 29% earth. And so what we want to do is kind of try to estimate this out. Because, these are kind of difficult numbers, 196,800,000, 29%, 71%. Those aren't the best numbers to work with. But, we don't always need to know exactly what everything is. So let's take a look at what we want to do. First of all, let's round off this number for the Earth. And let's do it to the nearest 100 million. So it's 196 million. And let's round that off to 200 million. That'll be an easier number to work with because that's just so much simpler to figure out. All right, so number 2 says round the percent of the earth that's land to the nearest 10%. So we've got 29. 29 is a little hard to work with, so nearest 10%, let's round that off, and we'll say 30%. Now we've got some easier numbers to work with, and now we're going to do what we did in the last section, where we're going to do some mental math. So we want to say, what is 30% of 2 million? So 30%, we could think of that as 0.3 times 200 million. And, it might be simplest if we think about that in, let's think of it, well, what would be 1/10? If we had 1/10, we're going to move the decimal place 1. So we're going to get 200,000,000. We're going to get that number, 20 million. But we know that it's got to be 3 times that. So 20 million times 3, that's going to get me 60 million square miles. So we've got about 60 million square miles that we get to live on the earth. Not too bad. All right, let's move on. So we're going to do some of these. So here's what we're looking for. We're looking for this key term called compatible numbers. So what we're looking for are two numbers that are easy to divide together. So let's take a look at example number 1. It says 19% of 30. Well, okay, 19%, that's not a real good number. I don't like that number. But 20%, that'd be a lot better. So we'll say 20%. 30's okay. I like numbers that end in 0s and 5s and those. So that's not a bad one. So 20% of 30. I can do that in my head. I could think of that as 1/5 of 30, or 1/5 times 30, and divide by 30 by 5, and I end up with 6. So it is approximately 6. Now this is not equal to, this is approximately 6 when we're done here. All right, so let's take a look at another one here. Number 2 says 25% of 41. 25%, that's a pretty good number. I like 5s, I like 0s. That's not too bad, but the 41's not very good. So let's make it 25% of 40. And so I can think of that as 1/4, because I know 25% is 1/4 of 40. What's a fourth of 40? Well, that's 10. So this is, once again, approximately equal to 10, about 10. Now this one's a little more challenging. Let's take a look at this one. If we take a look, 65% of 76, 65. Now that ends in 5, but I don't know a good number for 65, but it is close to 2/3. So let's try that. Let's try 2/3. 76, I could probably figure out 2/3 of 75 pretty easily. So let's do that. Let's use 75. And 2/3 of 75, a third of 75 would give me 25, and I need two of those, so it would be 50. So we're going to be approximately 50. Okay, so let's move on to these problems. And now we're going to estimate percents, estimate the percent that we've got. So let's take a look at this first example, 8 out of 25. We're going to make something so we can kind of estimate that percent. 8 out of 25, if it were 8 out of 24, I know that 8 would go into 24 3 times, so I know that would be a third, and I could say that that is 33 1/3%. So that would be a pretty good estimate. The one thing I don't like about this particular problem is I think 25 is a pretty easy number to work with. I don't know that I would even estimate that number. I would tell you what it was exactly. But for our example here, what they want us to do is to learn to estimate. So that's what we did. But I would probably say, well, 8 out of 25 is 32%, just because I know that 25 goes in 104 times. And same thing with this next one. They kind of do the same kind of a problem. But let's work it to understand the idea of finding a fraction that we know a percent for pretty easily. Because you wouldn't know 14 out of 25. You could maybe calculate it, but you probably don't have it memorized. So if we said, well, instead of 14 out of 25, what if it was 15 out of 25? Because all those 5s will reduce down, and I could take a 5 out of everything, and I'd get 3 over 5. And 3 over 5, I know my fifths, my percents for my fifths. So 3 over 5 gives me 60%. So this would be approximately 60%. So 14 out of 25 would be close to that. Estimates are great, especially to check things. So when you're working these things and you're trying to figure out, well, did I do it right? An estimate is a really good way of trying to figure that out. Now this next one, this one is probably more where I would use the estimates in. I think this one works, makes a lot of sense to do that. So you got 89 out of 121. I can't do anything with those numbers. Those are hard. So I'm going to automatically try to get things to like the nearest tens a lot of times. Nearest tens, nearest fives, a lot of times are good as you're trying to figure these out. So I'm going to say 90 out of 120. Now after you do that, sometimes you'll find that you didn't get a good number, but this one looks pretty good. 90 out of 120. Well, okay, I can take tens out, so it's 9 out of 12. And 9 out of 12 is 3/4, and so I know that 3/4 is 75%. All right, your turn. Stop the video. Estimate these out. No calculators, because you guys always do want to do this in your head anyway. So here you go. Here's your chance. Do it in your head. Figure out some numbers that would work, and estimate them out. See if you can come out with good values for these. All right, so let's check them out. 7 out of 7 out of 57. That's an interesting one. This one might have been a little difficult for you to figure out. But if you think about the fact that there is a multiple of 7 that's pretty close to 57. 8 times 7 is 56. So let's try that. So let's say 7 out of 56. So 7 out of 56. And if we know that 8 times 7 is 56, I take 7 out of everything, I'm going to get 1/8. And once again, if you don't remember it, you may want to learn it, but 1/8 is 12.5%, or 12.5%. Okay, so on B, let's take a look at B. We've got 9 out of 25. Now you could do this, you could calculate that out. I mean, I could figure that out in my head, but let's make it just a little bit easier. Let's say instead of 9, we've got 10. So let's say 10 out of 20. Now it becomes really simple. So I take 5s out and I get 2/5, and I know that 2/5 is going to be 40%. And let's do the last one, and I've got 7 out of 79. Now you could have done a couple of different things on this one. I'm going to show you one that comes out maybe the easiest. There's another possibility I could think of that I maybe would have tried with this. But let's say this one, if we put this to a whole number or a 10, we get 80. And 7 doesn't go with 80 very well, so let's try 8. So we could say 8 out of 80. Now that's pretty simple. That's going to get me 1/10 or 10%. So, and that's going to be close. That's going to be pretty close. I would have maybe thought of another thought. I would have thought of 7 out of 77. I would have known that that's 1/11. Now I know that fraction, so for me that one's not too bad. But if you guys don't know that fraction, that becomes a little more complicated. So, you probably wouldn't want to use that one. So 8 out of 80 was probably a better way of doing that particular one and getting that figured out. By the way, 1 out of 11, if you have an 11th, that's, 09, 09 repeating. So what we're talking about is 9%, roughly. So I would have gotten 9%, and that would have been pretty close. Both of those are relatively close answers. So there's nothing wrong with either one of those. And let's take a look at this last sample here. This is kind of some, this is pretty common stuff that people would do something with, grid systems and try to figure this stuff out. So this is what they're kind of trying to show you, something that's like real life. So they say firefighters use geometry and aerial photography to estimate how much of a forest has been damaged by fire. So in this example here, we've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A 7 by 7 grid. So we've got a total of 49 squares. And if you counted all those, just, trust me, they counted them for you. 24 of those squares were burned. So 24 out of 49. Yeah, there's probably better numbers. I mean, these are both close to 5s and 10s. So if you said 25 out of 50, that's a real easy one to do. 25 out of 50 is a half. And of course, we know a half is 50%. So that's a pretty good estimation. 24 out of 49 would be close to 50%. So we could assume that this fire burned about 50% of this area in the photograph anyway. Okay, so that is section 5. So you're done with section 5 and you're ready to go on and do the problems at the end. Now, just one thing, just to make note, a reminder, I guess. Anytime that you need more help with any of these things, there are numbers of things online. You can always go to Khan Academy, so you've got khanacademy.org. Make sure you spell his name right. I don't know that it needs the www, but if you spell his name wrong, it sends you to another place. Your book also has some things online. So there's a website, msmath3.net/ here's a good one for a quiz. It gives you some quizzes that you can just take and do practice quizzes. Self-check quiz. Make sure you get all those underscores in there. And you can pick out every section that we have. This will give you kind of every chapter, and you can just go to the chapter, pick out a section that we're doing, and you can do a little quiz. I'll give you a 5-question quiz, and you can see how you're doing. So this is a great way to monitor, do you understand this stuff? And if you don't, then, go back and find some more information, or come and talk to me. This is exactly when, if you just cannot figure this stuff out, that's what we want to have that extra time in class for. So anytime that you need to, you can come back and figure that stuff out, or come and ask questions.